Hello everyone, EtherSong here, and in today's video, I would like to give my thoughts on the early access to Path of Exile 2. To give some background, I have reached in-game. I've been doing some tier 15 maps. Not sure if I have the things here, but so I've gotten pretty far into the game. I've got tier 15 maps here, and I've been doing some of the mapping and everything. So I thought this would be a good point to give my impressions of the game and to give some other background about this. This is the first ARPG I have played in a long time. In the past, I had played Diablo 2. I played Titan Quest, Torchlight 2, and Diablo 3 at release. And I played through the Diablo 3 campaign once, but then returned it because I had very bad lag over here in Japan. But in any case, it's been over 10 years since I have really gotten into an ARPG. But this is one that looked real appealing to me. First start out, it looked like it was going to be a little bit more slow and methodical. The boss fights looked very engaging. It kind of reminded me of, I know this is very cliche, but you know, kind of like Dark Souls, you know, with the kind of the boss design. So I wanted to try it out. There was a lot of hype surrounding the game when it came out, and there's been a lot of players for the game. There's been around 500,000 players on Steam, and that's stayed pretty consistently for a number of weeks. So it seems like a lot of other players are also interested in the game. So give, I guess, some starters here. Let's look at the map. So going through the acts, the story of the game, I enjoyed a lot. The boss fights were great. They were definitely the highlights of the game. So when you get to these, each like major area kind of had a boss you could fight, and the boss had a lot of varied mechanics, so they were very interesting. So I was always excited to fight like new big bosses in the game. And currently there's only 3 major acts you can go through. So you start out in this area, you go to kind of a desert area, and then it's kind of like a jungle exploration. And once you get through the first 3 acts, it kind of loops back around to a cruel version, like a harder version of those acts. And later on, they're going to actually have 6 acts, but they just aren't ready yet. It's still early access. So that's just kind of the state of the game currently. And once you get through the final 3 cruel acts, you enter the in-game where you're able to start doing this giant map that you progress, and it gets more difficult as you go along, and there's various modifiers in the map. So you basically go into an area and fight a bunch of enemies. If you clear out those, and sometimes they have bosses and things, and you get a bunch of loot, and you keep on kind of progressing. And there's also a final like pinnacle boss you can fight if you get far enough, but I have not reached that point yet. So like I was saying, overall, the story, I guess, going through the bosses and everything like that, I enjoyed quite a bit. I am playing the witch class here. I am currently Infernalist, so each class has a Ascendancy class that you can change into. Currently there's 2 Ascendancy classes for 6 of the classes available, for which there's Infernalist and I believe it's like Blood Mage or something. But in the final version, there's going to be 12 classes, each with 3 Ascendancy classes, so that means you're going to be up to like 36 different variations of things you can do, which is pretty insane, but it's also very exciting, so I'm looking forward to more of that stuff coming out. As for the witch class itself, it felt a little bit like playing on easy mode going through the game. I started out playing with Arsonist builds, so there's various, I guess, skills you can unlock here. Let's see if I can maybe take a skill gem out here. Kind of look at the various skills that the witch has available. But yeah, so there's various different, I guess, skills you can kind of unlock. I wanted to go with kind of the minion master kind of theme, so that's what I did. And with Arsonists were very strong, and I went with that for most of the game, and then I kind of wanted to switch it up, so I went to some snipers with some other, I guess, skeletal and clerics. Kind of was it the skeletal storm mages and some clerics mixed in it, but that's kind of what I did here. Another thing is you can actually use the skills of all the other classes, which is very interesting. I found the kind of the skill design and I guess the even like the passive tree. I'll get into that in a second, but I found all that very interesting because once you take a skill, so you can actually use all the skills like you from like the sorcerer or even some of the other weapon skills from other classes if you wanted to, but you can mix and match all the skills in the game, which is very exciting. It's very interesting for build crafting. And then beyond that, when you take skills, you can actually modify them with these support gems to give further effects. So for example, if I look at maybe like my skeletal warrior here, I can have it so it lives a little bit longer when it dies. It does fire damage to things around it. It explodes when it dies. And it also can like break armor. So you can modify your, I guess, each of your skills even further and kind of think about different ways that they could support. For example, like the Infernal Hound here has a ability to put fire exposure on enemies it ignites, which reduces enemies' fire resistance. And nice thing about the Infernal Hound is everything around it is always ignited, so you can basically put a constant debuff on things around it. And then you could have like the Skeletal Storm Mage here, which shocks do not expire on ignited foes, and since Infernal Hound is always igniting things, you can basically keep up a constant shock on some enemies. So there's interesting combos and synergy you can find with skills like that, which I enjoy a lot. And going into the skill tree here, it's just massive. Initially, I was a little bit overwhelmed. I wasn't sure. I had seen kind of what it was like in Path of Exile 1, even though I never played it. But this being a new game, I thought it would be a good kind of like starting point. I wouldn't have to... I'd be learning it with everyone else, I would say, which is nice. And I kind of got the gist of it going through it. And it's not as daunting as it initially looks, because, for example, I am playing a minion build, which means I just kind of search for minion, and then a lot of these things light up. I can just kind of go in that direction. So you're like, oh, these are all minion, these are all minion, these are minion over here, these are minion over here. So it's like, oh, so I want to be getting these ones, right? And then other things like I use intelligence, so I want some intelligence, or I use energy shields, so I want those. So you kind of get an idea of what you want to do once you get started. And you can, nice thing is, even if you want to change later on, you can refund points pretty easily and try to switch up some builds. So I've switched it up a few times while going through it. Currently, I am going with kind of a energy shield minion, and also I got this skill over here, which is mind over matter, or this passive over here, which is mind over matter, which means I also can use my mana as a life pool. So I basically have 3 different life pools. I have the shield that initially takes the damage, then my mana will take damage, and finally my life will take damage. So I am decently tanky, which is good. And beyond that, I also have another passive skill that means I can pick up energy shield from enemies that have died with this Grim Feast, which can basically double my shield again. So I can get that up to, I don't know, almost 4,500. So I can get up to maybe around 7,500 life or more, depending on how I kind of build things. And my equipment's still not the best, but it's decent. I got +4 to level to all minion skills here, +1 on my helmet, a +2 on my amulet, and then just kind of a mix of other things, spirit here, and then some block and whatnot. As for my items, I got a few from friends, but it's mostly just what I found in the game. And I have not done the trading because trading looks very annoying. Currently, there's no auction house or anything in game. So to trade, you basically put your items like in a box here, and you can set a price. You need premium tabs, but you can set a price on these, and then these get put up on a trade website. So you actually need to go outside the game and you search a trade website, and if you find an item you want, you whisper somebody in game. So it feels pretty antiquated, like it like something you'd see in a game 25 years back or so. I remember playing online games, back in like the early 2000s, mid 2000s, and that's what I would be doing. You'd whisper people or go into towns to sell things. So having to do that still doesn't feel the best, and I'm hoping they change the system. It seems like 7 years back or so, they put out like a manifest saying that they didn't want trade to be too easily, because then people would get geared too easily, and they would just finish their build too quickly. But in another recent interview 10 months back or so, they said that they realized that most people want a instant buyout. So at least being able to like see an item and buy it instantly without actually having to whisper somebody and meet them. And, with whispering people, it can be a big time commitment if nobody actually responds to you, or things go wrong, or it can be scams and things like that. So that's kind of just annoying and something I didn't want to deal with. So I haven't really done much of the trading or any of it at all, actually. I just kind of looked at the site once and be like, yeah, I don't want to deal with this. But yeah, like I was saying, about 10 months back or so, they had said in an interview that they realized that people want an instant buyout method, and also being able to easily search for things. So that's something that they're aware of and are hoping to work on. So I'm hoping that maybe later on in the early access, or once the game released, they actually have a better method of trading, but that's not available currently. So that's one of, I guess, the kind of like the bad points of the game. I got some other goods and bads. The game supports WASD movement. You can choose. I know a lot of these games in the past would use only mouse clicks to move around, which is, I think, just kind of something of old. Like Diablo 2 did it, so a lot of games just kind of stuck with it. But it seems like most games now are giving WASD options. Blue Path of Exile 1 did not have WASD, so seeing that as an option, I think makes it a lot easier for new players coming into the game. So that's just what I started with entering the game, and it was very nice being able to use WASD to move around. In addition, they added a dodge roll, so you can dodge attacks like this, and a lot of bosses have heavy attacks, like very strong attacks that you need to dodge around with this, which can be I guess pretty engaging to do with. So if you see the boss charging up an attack, you can roll away from it and get outside of it. So I liked basically those mechanics with the bosses and things like that. Some of the downsides to the game is, for the most part, when I was going through the story and things like that, I only died a few times. Mostly at like bosses. Maybe it would take me a couple tries to defeat some of the stronger bosses. But playing minions, it's basically, like I said, an easy mode, because the minions will do a lot of the damage for you. They can tank some hits. The enemies will focus on them some more. And you can stay out of range. And also you can kind of build other defenses, like with like the mind over matter for mana defense. And later on I added the energy shield, because that's pretty strong with Grim Feast. But once I got into mapping here, occasionally you just find yourself in a situation where you just take like a massive hit and die nearly instantly. And adding some more shield and the Grim Feast helps some, but it can still happen, and you'll just get like instantly killed without even like realizing it. And I guess occasionally when going through like the story of the game, even if something like that were to happen, you usually had a checkpoint pretty close by, especially at bosses. you'd be able to go right back into action. If you were dying at a boss, you could keep trying and trying, kind of like Dark Souls, or I guess more like Elden Ring with like stakes of Marika. You'd be able to go right back into the boss fight, right? And the same thing here, they would have checkpoints right outside the boss arenas, so you could go right back in. But once you get to the end game, that's not the case. So if you were fighting a boss and died, you would actually lose your waystone, which is your way to enter that map, and lose all the modifiers on these points. So if it had a modifier for a boss on that map, you would lose that, and you'd basically lose a lot of stuff, and it would be a lot more punishing. It seems like actually in Path of Exile 1, you would have 6 tries. You'd have like 6 portals to go into one of these maps, so you would have a few more tries. But currently in Path of Exile 2, you only have 1 try for each of these maps you go into, which means it's a lot more punishing. And what is it? There's also these citadels you can find. I don't know if I've actually found any yet, but you go to those citadels and you get these, I think, like keys or something. And eventually you can fight like this like final pinnacle boss, and it's a very tough boss, and you need to collect these 3 different keys from 3 different citadels to enter it, and you can fight it, but you only can fight it once, and if you die there it will just, you'll lose all your keys and you have to find those citadels again. But it has a lot of one-shot mechanics, so going through the story, the one-shot mechanics are okay because you can go right back into the action. But once you're in these maps, it seems counterintuitive to everything you've played so far. Because, okay, so like if the game's punishing, like something like Elden Ring or something, and you can die easily, you can go right back into the action, so it's not a problem. But in the mapping, it's just punishing, because there's no way to go right back into action because it locks you out of everything. So I'm hoping they can fix kind of like the in-game aspect of that a little bit more, so you can at least have some more tries, especially with something like the pinnacle boss later on, being able to, you know, get multiple tries with that. So it feels like a lot of those areas still need to be kind of worked out, like this in-game. Even like in-game itself, it just kind of feels, I don't know, menial, or there's not as much of, it's not really as engaging as the bosses or like the story up till this point. So I think the in-game still needs a lot of work. So I think that's something they're aware of. And I'm guessing that after New Year's break, they're going to have a lot of more changes coming to the game, because they've already made some changes before then. This game just released at the beginning of December, but they're on kind of their Christmas holiday, New Year's break right now, and after that, when they come back, I think they're going to have a lot more changes coming to the game. They already made some changes about things people were complaining about, like dodge rolls, not being able to go through enemies and things like that. So, but I think the game will definitely improve going forward, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they change, you know, going forward. As for some, I guess, other things, overall, like I was saying, I've had a great experience with the game. There's 2 other main mechanics that I didn't really cover yet. Is the way to ascend. In Act 2 and Act 3, there's these places you can go to ascend, and one of them is, where was it? Oh, this Trial of Sekimaz. You basically go into this kind of like roguelike trial kind of thing, where you have a certain amount of honor, and if you take hits from enemies, that honor goes down. And each room you add another, basically a modifier to it, so enemies get stronger or you get weaker. So there's like boons and debuffs that kind of stack up as you go through the trial, so it gets harder and harder in each room, and at the end of each kind of layer of floors, you kind of choose your path going to the floors. At the end there's a boss, and if for harder things there's more levels. So let's see if I have some of the items here. Yeah, so number of trials, so it's 4. So each trial, you'd go through like a number of rooms at the end of the boss. So you need to do this to get your Ascendancy points, which allow you to unlock your Ascendancy. So for me, it's the Infernalist. And doing it once, you get 2 points. So I unlocked like the little Hellhound first, but then there's also this other trial in Act 3. This is like this Chaos Temple, I believe it was. I forget the name of it. A Temple of Chaos. So you go there, and that's another kind of unique area. So it's kind of like this boss kind of arena thing, or like there's another modifier kind of thing. So you'd go into there and you choose a modifier where maybe enemies deal more damage, or there's traps that appear in the arena, or you take more damage from certain things or things like that. But you keep on adding these different modifiers again, and you fight a bunch of enemies or you fight bosses and you progress through that. This one does not have honor that goes down when you take hits. The other one had honor, it would go down if you take hits, and it reached 0, it would end, which is a problem for a lot of people. Like this Act 2 one, it seems like it's a lot more difficult for melee classes because you kind of need to take hits. For a minion master class, you're usually at a range anyways, your minions are taking all the hits, so you don't really suffer as much, so it's not really a problem. But I'll get into that later. Basically, melee and range, there's a big difference, so that's another thing I wanted to touch upon. But yeah, basically there's these two things to go through, and it seems like opinions about these ways to ascend currently are kind of mixed. It's felt like kind of interesting, but also feels like those areas also need a little bit more work. But the Ascendancies themselves, I feel, are pretty good. I enjoy my, let's see, my Infernalist. I was able to get a Loyal Hellhound, so it's another like free summon. Can convert some damage to fire. I'm getting more spirit, which allows me to summon more minions and things like that. And I still haven't done my, you can do it up to 4 times, so you can get up to 8 Ascendancy points. So I still haven't done my 4th Ascendancy yet, but I would probably raise my energy shield with that. But overall, I thought the Ascendancies themselves were pretty good, but the way you do them might still need some work. And like I was touching upon a little bit with the Ascendancy trials, there seems to be a big divide between ranged and melee classes currently. Ranged classes seem to be a lot easier, especially Minion Master, having these minions kind of tank for you. With melee, you need to dodge a lot more, and it's a lot more, I guess, kind of like difficult going in. So I think a lot of players, maybe starting with melee, suffered a lot more than players that started ranged. In these early acts, I didn't really have too many problems with the bosses. Like, I would die maybe a couple times, but overall, I went through it pretty easily. But I've heard a lot of people, like when the game came out, that they were struggling with a lot of these early bosses. So I think that really stems from kind of a melee versus range problem going on here. And one thing I learned about recently is this kind of armor problem, where you have armor here. You know, you have these armor and resistances, and these resistances reduce how much like fire damage you take or cold damage you take. So you'd be reducing like the fire damage by 76% or something like that, which is pretty easy to understand, except armor doesn't seem to work like that, where it says 22%, but let's say you had 50% armor reduction, that actually doesn't reduce all hits by 50%. The larger the hit, the less it actually reduces, so it's actually not very effective against blocking large hits. And the one thing you want to reduce in this game are large hits, especially from bosses that can one-shot you. So armor doesn't really have much of a place in the game currently, except for blocking lots of small hits. So it seems like the current meta is just to build a bunch of spirit. So I'm hoping that they change the way armor works in the game, so it's actually more meaningful. and more impactful, and maybe reduce the necessity for so much shield in the game. But we'll see going forward. I'm sure that some of the things that they'll work on fixing after this winter break is over. And then, yeah, so that was one of the main things I wanted to talk about. Oh, and one other thing. There was one other thing in my mind that I want to talk about before this ends in this video, but Magic Find. So, Magic Find. This is another problem in the game currently. So you have these items that have Magic Find on them. So increased rarity of items found, I'm equipping some of these on places that I can, but these seem to have a big impact on the items you can find in the game. And for a lot of players that have been playing for a while, they have up to, I don't know, like 200% Magic Find on their armor. I think I only have like 57%, or maybe up to like 70% with this charm as well. But yeah, it seems like a lot of players are going up to like 200%, and it seems to have a huge impact, or even like higher, 500%, and it has a huge impact on the rare items you find in the game, where it's like basically needed, and it punishes you if you don't have it, because it seems to really affect the economy. So a lot of players are hoping that this is something that gets removed from the game, and I am one that agree with those players, and I don't think that Magic Find is something that is needed in the game. I had seen this problem in Guild Wars 2 as well. When it initially launched, they had Magic Find on all armor, so everyone would just put Magic Find on, and when you're in groups, everyone would be building Magic Find. It would hurt your stats, and eventually they got rid of all the Magic Find in Guild Wars 2 and just made it kind of like a global passive that you build up as you play the game. And I think that, I don't know what Path of Exile 1 did, but I hope that they do something kind of similar in Path of Exile 2, where maybe they just remove it. Maybe it's something you can build up going forward, or it's just maybe it's just something that Waystones have, but I think they should remove it. I don't think it should be needed on your armor. It just kind of feels bad currently in how it affects things. But in any case, I think that covers my current opinions of the game. Maybe I'll have some more thoughts on the game later. But overall, I highly recommend the game. There are some, both goods and bads currently, but it is a very solid base for an ARPG, and I'm definitely excited to play more going forward, and I'm looking forward to, I guess, the more classes that get added to the game, the more Ascendancies, and also some of the changes they make going forward through the early access and into the release of the game next year. In any case, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know if you are enjoying Path of Exile 2 as well, and I hope to see you later.